Franco's mic'd up, so you're just going to have to rely on me being projecting well enough. Thanks very much, Peter Clifton and the Southwest NRM team, and hello to everyone. Thanks for coming. Before we start, I'd like to thank MLA for especially Alana McEwen and Russell Patterson, who helped get this project off the ground. This is a producer-led demonstration, so we're working with the producers with what they're doing, and Facey Group is basically involved in collecting the data to make sure we can validate the value that is bringing to the producers. So, of course, our growers are also a big part of this. We thank a big thank you to Tom Whitworth, Audrey Byrne and Sandra Fowler. They've shared their time, their knowledge with us. And lastly, we'd like to recognise the Drought Hub for supporting initiatives like this one and for their ongoing efforts to help build resilience in farming, especially when it's a bit of a climate challenging time.
Thank you, Martina. Starting for the presentation of our project, this is a quick overview of the structure that we're going to present today. So we're going to first start with the background, a little bit of context of what is the relevance of the system and actually what is the drought resilient component. And we're going to go through the goals of the whole project, what we want to achieve, and what are the proper benefits and practices that are common for a confinement system. Afterwards, we're going to present the 2023 outcomes, and we're going to have a little bit of comparison of what is expected and we actually have on 2024, which is still running. The comparative practices of what we have learned from 2023 and the outcomes of 2024 and what we can take away of all those experiences. So, context. First of all, what is important to understand is that mixed farming in our area and for our growers is highly important. So 70% of them at least still rely on sheep on their systems just to properly generate more profits. That led us to the main challenge, that is basically climate variability. So as you can see lately, you can have these dry really seasons or really late breaks or early breaks that just keep coming. I'm focusing in two particular aspects, that is seasonal rainfall, that is just coming down every year. We have really 3 continuous dry seasons, and that's probably ongoing, and the delayed autumn breaks. So those two combined just create these challenges for managing pastures properly and getting hitting targets of nutrition, and at the end of the day that's going to make growers buy more food, therefore it's going to reduce the margins and profit. So yeah, and what is the key issue that regarding to drought resilience that confinement feeding wants to tackle down is delayed pasture germinations. So how do you do that? So confinement feeding, what it does is just at the right timing, you just confine the ewes, feed them properly, get the good condition while recently seeded deferred pastures rest to be at a good timing at lambing and have the food available for them.
Great. So as Franco was saying, confinement feeding does target that critical lambing period, aiming to ensure we have more feed availability and improve the ewe nutrition during critical times in their life cycle. That helps us boost the efficiency of our pasture management systems. It also helps reduce supplementary feeding costs and other expenses, particularly things like time driving around the farm for daily checks, or if you do need to turn to feeding, you're feeding in a smaller area so you don't have to go from paddock to paddock. Additionally, confinement allows for more effective supervision so you can identify health issues faster, especially with underconditioned or sick ewes. Sheep usually remain in confinement for 3 to 5 weeks with feed adjusted to their nutritional needs based on feed tests. And you can separate them out by how many lambs are carrying as well. So you'll have your singletons all in together and your doubles somewhere else. The confinement areas are pretty simple, and often farmers have them anyway for feeding up lambs for that other side of the production cycle there. So they're just pens. You've got to have water sources, about 5 to 10 square metres per sheep, up to 500 sheep per space, have some windbreaks or trees around, which helps with hot weather as well, fairly well-drained soil, better hard clays or loamy soils to reduce summer dust and mud, with a gentle slope, 3 to 4%, and keep them away from dams to avoid that contamination. Water is incredibly important here, so some of those presentations about desal and keeping your water sources clean links to having a great confinement feeding system. You need 4 to 6 litres per head or up to 10 litres in hotter weather conditions, and you have to make sure that you're closely monitoring that. No muddy water, keep the salinity low, make sure you don't have algae outbreaks. Feed troughs, and it's much better to be feeding in troughs, 1 or 2-sided up above the ground. You have to have a decent amount of space per ewe, 15 to 20 centimetres per ewe. Self-feeders, they are more space efficient. They only actually allow between 5 to 10 centimetres per ewe. They can reduce the labour costs, but they control a little less of the feeding. So they're often used for finishing sheep before market and perhaps better in a non-dry season. So during confinement, the pastures are seeded with a further and they're given time to grow. You target to have about 1,000 kilograms of dry matter per hectare of food on offer by the time you're lambing. When you reintroduce the ewes to the deferred pastures, their diet needs to be adjusted gently over a couple of days by feeding them perhaps out on green pastures and then back into feed alongside their normal feed for 3 days, or you have hay pellets.
Yeah. As you can see, as Tina was explaining, this is just a small, simple layout on how it's a confinement, simple confinement system. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. On that time side, so I'm going to go through how the sites have different layouts but similar results in what is coming the 2024 explanation of the results. So this is 2023. First of all, the two mobs that I compare, we're going to call one pasture-only ones and confinement ones.
All the ewes were merino ewes,
yes.
But the pasture ewes, there were slight differences. And this is the problem with running a producer demonstration, is you can't do it like a real controlled experiment. The pasture ewes were bred to Suffolk rams, so they were gestating crossies, and the confinement ewes had pure merino lambs.
Pure merino lambs. So yeah, that's actually changed a little bit of our result in some way.
Some of the slides are interesting because of that.
Yeah, that's because we only have one site for 2023, and those are the results of the actually the condition scoring. So the condition scoring was done through all the seasons, through all these 4 specific milestones, and as you can see, the confinement ewes have definitely better performance overall, picking up to 0.9 from when they were leaving confinement, meaning that they really gain a lot of good value at that moment. Something that is important to mention is that at that time we couldn't have the condition scoring for the pasture ewes because it was not a grower's practice. It was quite risky just to move the pregnant ones back to the yard just for the scoring. But in that sense, even though we do, if you have a really good number here, still at the end of the season you still have the same condition. So no improvements at all when you're not on confinement. And as you can see, the confinement ewes get a 0.4 of improvement. So that's a good takeaway. Now, regarding the feed of offer, as you can see here, it's important to mention that 2023 was for us what we call a good season. So we have an early break, a really good rain early, so that might have pushed the previously established pastures to grow quicker. So as you can see, first, you have for the pastures that was not seeded at the year, higher available biomass for the sheep. And that was done with cats, that was dried. And then perfectly weighed and extrapolated. But you can see sign of overgrazing right here at lambing, which it means that the confinement ones that were put just to grow better and increase the conditions have more available food for over the target that is 1,000, which is fantastic, at the right time on lambing, which says that the system actually works. because this is the point that you want to target. But overall, as you can see throughout the season, the pasture had more available food all the time. And that speaks a lot with nutrition. So the nutrition analysis was done as related in confinement, and as you can see, if you see the first and the last items, those are the comparison of the pastures. These are the fair ones. This one is the fair one. This one is the regular one. So crude protein, definitely more value of the fed pastures, and they have more metabolized energy as well. So they have less available food, but they have better nutrition, even though. And of course, you have the nutritional value that you get for the confinement system. So that explains why the scoring was higher. And throughout the season, they still got more nutrition, but less available food.
Okay, then we sort of looked at lambing and ewe mortality. So ewe mortality is 2% lower in confinement. Most deaths occurring after ewes left confinement. The lambs from the confinement ewes did not perform as well, and as we said, this might have been due to differences in the breeding. The crossbred lambs are known to have better survivability and growth, which is why people love their crossies. It could explain why the ewes that were not in confinement had that higher marking and weaning percentages. We'll get to check that this year when we look at some other flocks. The higher marking and weaning rates recorded in the pasture ewes could be due to the good early break. So in 2023, people weren't as interested in confinement feeding systems because we had good early rain and the pastures looked fantastic. And in fact, we were going to do two examples, and one of the farmers participating their pastures looked so good they didn't need to put any ewes in confinement at all. Having said that, this year was a totally different situation. Next slide. Overall, confinement ewes showed higher survivability rates, traded off with slightly lower weaning percentages, but additionally that pasture quality and quantity were significantly improved at lambing, so that might help mitigate issues like soil erosion and maintaining better ground cover heading into summer.
Yep. So those are the takeaways of 2023. Now, just going through 2024, the first thing that we have to mention is there are two new sites. So we have two new growers that are fully adapted confinement systems. So we're going to have a really interesting comparison of how the systems works in different sites. So they do confinement feeding, but in a different way, even though they still hit similar targets. So that will give us to what we expected of this season. So this season in comparison to the last one was actually we have a really late follow-up rain, and it started raining really like around May or so, is it?
Yeah, it was late.
It was pretty late. So we call it a tough season. So in that sense, we expected that will probably just make the difference in between the pasture only and the fair ones available food just similar. So you don't have that good kick that the last season gave to the previously established pastures. So probably a less of a difference will be something expected. That also going to affect that at lambing they're going to have less available food probably. So that was our takeaway when we started 2024. And of course the feed adjustment. So because the season is more challenging, prices go high. So adjustment of food is something that growers a lot do. So probably less available food at confinement just make the scoring a little bit lower, a little bit more variable. So those are the two things that we thought is going to happen for this year. What we actually get is some consistency on the scoring. So confinement ewes definitely still performing better than non-confinement ones. Probably the peak is not that high than the last season, but still performing a lot better than pasture ewes, which is great. Seems that the system is actually working in that sense. We're still analyzing the feed and offer and the nutritional analysis, which will be upcoming for the 2025 results at the end of the project. And of course, we have the diversity of practices. So I have a little bit of information about the different things that growers do in the different sites that we have in this year. So one is having crossbreeds, merino flocks, and is using, for instance, self-feeders. Using self-feeders in a layout with different amount of self-feeders depending of how big is the confinement area. So using 1, 2, 3, or 4, and depending as well how much food they want to give them at the right time. Also changing the time of feeding. So instead of doing 3 times in the week, doing 2 times, which tends to be a little bit risky. But what it's doing is increasing the amount of food that it's giving it, is 2 times in the week, and getting more value of it. So they're actually their scoring is quite high than the previous year that we were doing it 3 times in the week. We also have one site that is using just lip pens instead of self-feeders and having a different system of surveillance. So trying to get into 2 hours and just giving the food and just check on them every time to time, which is still less expensive than just moving the chip around. So, before going to the Q&A, I would like to again just thank everyone that is participating here. Thank you all for hearing us today.
Thank you.